This review is brought to you by absolutely nobody. Well, maybe you guys and the patrons. Warhammer 40k DaemonHunters comes out soon. It's a turn-based XCOM style game following the Grey Knights chapter against the corrupting force of chaos. You root out and put a stop to an insidious plot to infect the galaxy with the Bloom, an intergalactic cosmic plague capable of rotting worlds into oblivion. And if you don't know what Space Marines or Warhammer 40k is, make no mistake, you'll know by the end of this review. If you get a chance, go out, find a YouTuber that you like, a small one, a large one, whatever that you haven't subscribed to, and subscribe. YouTube is all over the place now, or subscribe here. Let's jump into this. Presentation. What more is there to say about Warhammer 40k Space Marines? Giant warrior men with multiple hearts. They got a gene seed inside their bodies that carries the workings of their creation. And they're so badass that one of them thought in their dead time that they might as well rivet bolt their faces to show their military rank. They're the best of the best, fighting to keep the universe clean of chaos while flying around in massive ships like reverse bloodmobiles. First, the detail here, start to stop, is tight. Excellent modeling throughout, a slight lean towards a much cleaner presentation in the cutscenes and the designs, though, than we've seen in other games, especially in this Warhammer world and the various different titles that we've got. It's noticeable the moment you jump in and you see that first character. There's a bit less of that defined high-resolution grit that a lot of the prior titles have gone for, and a slight slide into a more bold and almost comic tone, which I love and I think works perfectly. It sets everything up to be easier to parse, from outfitting them to seeing the ship repairs to ripping across alien battlefields and watching the cutscenes themselves. But it isn't just about the Space Marines. Ripping across those battlefields is what matters. It's about Kool-Aid Manning your way through doors to see what's on the other side, because no one has time for handles, and then ripping apart enemies with your thoughts. Before Gears thought about chainsaws and guns, cool granddaddy Space Marines were Husqvarnaing the shit out of gene stealers. Warhammer is also about the balance between war and religion, and you see that throughout the entire game. In this case, it's a war religion, but it shows. Religious iconography excels here. There's basically a part where you can put on one of the shoulders of your Space Marines that looks like receipts from a cash register that only has one single button that sums up all your hate for the enemies. It also does a great job in most of the environments themselves. Destruction can occur in many places, with you able to topple down statues and pillars into enemies, explode carelessly placed weapon caches, and take down alien plant life with 3 eyes and a suspiciously maternal-looking body part. And that's just one of many ecosystems that you can explore and whittle down as you go out there and take on chaos. Not everything's perfect. Let's talk about the HUD. It's borderline criminal. If it's not vignetting the sides of the border in some attempt to yeet out information that the enemy has taken their turn, it's got HUDs on HUDs on HUDs. Hell, even when you're talking to somebody in some of the role-playing part, there's this massive matrix computer beside you eating up a third of the screen with 4 buttons not shown and 1 button that basically just says, yes, sir. It's hilarious, but I can see a lot of people hating it. It's that big, bold design that Warhammer has. It's just bigger and bolder in some ways than other prior titles. Luckily, you can turn off a number of the indicators that you'll see within the main game proper itself, but not all of them. I guess it's just what you sacrifice for the Emperor. Now, performance is not sacrifice. With a 2080 Ti, I was getting well above 60 FPS most of the time. There were some stutters on some of the larger levels, especially when a lot of things started exploding or when a bunch of enemies teleported in. You have a number of graphical choices, as well as your typical full screen windows and windowed full screen, and a couple anti-aliasing effects as well, though I would say stick with TSAA. Sadly, there is no DLSS or FSR that I could find, which is a missed opportunity in all ways in this game. That would definitely help you get that performance if you need it. Be warned that because the game is on a grid system, panning and zooming can actually make the game look a bit dodgy FPS-wise, because the camera likes to pause a moment on each of those squares to lock you into that grid and show where you can move, and it can look a little low FPS. It's not all the time, but it is something that you will notice. Going away from characters and moving around without that, you can see that it's much smoother. It's just sort of the way this game does things. A known IP like Warhammer has a number of expectations: accuracy, fluidity, animation, representation. DaemonHunters hits most of them. It has a couple problems along the way, but its accuracy is higher than that 99% handgun you got in XCOM 2 that kept missing. As a package, I absolutely dig the graphics. Does the audio keep up with this?
Arcane talismans as catalysts for corruption are scarcely a novelty to us Knights of Titan.
First, the good. I like the voices. They didn't play out throughout the entire discussion, though, which is weird for a game that seems to have good voice actors for all of it. Unless the game is in a major cutscene or a major discussion with your chapter leader, for the most part, the character says one sentence out of a paragraph that's written, sort of like the bullet point. This is odd because the game has a number of dialogue trees as well with different characters on board, and it gives it this almost unfinished feeling, and this is with the last patch prior to release. Delivery can be excellent, though, like the case of your main leader who keeps disconnecting from people because he just doesn't have the time to talk to anybody, to your second in command, an old wily veteran, and even people who just come on your ship and try to commandeer it. It's even more of a surprise, though, when you realize that Andy Serkis does the voice for one of these characters. Then again, maybe that's where the money was spent. One thing you should expect is no real surprises, not in the story or the presentation. I admit I loved some of the voices, the customization of the Space Marines themselves and their voices was awesome, but it really didn't elevate above that. Music. Also didn't elevate. Warhammer is a difficult genre when you think about it to nail the music. It's been years that we've seen these kind of games, from thrash punk with some of the FPS games to the more down-to-earth Warhammer games with that hit of excellent Space Marine heroic kind of soundtracks. Here it's just okay. It's a lot of celestial voices and backing themes that make you feel like it's super important, which is fine, but there really isn't any single track that sticks with you. And for a world so bent on showing heroism and huge battle moments, the tracks are actually pretty relaxed in that regard. There's also some really droning tracks that occur while you're in the main game proper, going about your ship, making different decisions there that I really do think could have been elevated a bit with something a little bit more musical almost. Now, when it comes to the sound, I like the samples themselves. They're pretty good for most of the weapons. You can hear the bouncing of bullets off your massive armor and the crackle of lightning from a quick teleport across the map. You can hear the thrum of these handguns that shoot mini missiles the size of Coca-Cola cans, and you realize that's the starting weapon in Warhammer 40,000. So you know what kind of world you're inhabiting right away. One of big, bold, excellent warfare. Occasionally, though, the mixing is not excellent. It's off. For example, when enemies get powered up or go into particular states, they'll scream and cackle and laugh. But that music and sound is still sort of low, where the voice elevates above that, and it makes them sound almost clinical and separate from everything else. Also, I would have loved to hear more environmental audio from these locations. For every location, there's a texture and theme and a feeling that the audio atmosphere should end up translating to the gamer. It elevates the good games from the great or the okay to the acceptable. This is more mediocre and stays there. It would have been nice to be able to volume adjust that out. You do have a couple adjustments, but it never really fixed that particular issue. Thankfully, what is there is fine. I just would have liked a little bit more work on that mixing. Speaking of mixing and matching gameplay styles, mixing and matching your approach to taking on enemies, that's the gameplay of Warhammer, and it always has been. Plague Demons starts with the Grey Warden's chapter fighting their way through another battle and another war with another enemy. The tutorial shows you the basic moves and ideas behind the game, like action points to move and reload, fire, and pull off different character abilities, as well as willpower points, which can augment moves, as well as power some of your special abilities. About 1 or 2 or maybe 5 or 10 disasters later, you're in a beat-up ship, barely able to travel, with a new visitor on board telling you about a new enemy encroaching within the known worlds. A pestilence called the Bloom, and you have to take the Grey Wardens into battle, flying around star systems, destructions, incursions of the Bloom before they, bloom, and fighting the enemies in various battle locations, all the while upgrading your ship and outfitting your characters with new skills. This game is tightened down a bit on the handling of a chapter. It's basically 4 to 5 screens. The overall planet screen that shows your ship, what mission is, if there's one on the planet that you're at, and the hazard you're going to face if you take it. The system map that shows you the known planets as well as their level of bloom infestations and when new events arise, and use this to travel around. You can also take a couple slight defensive measures here and reduce the planet's ability to pop off infestations if you get the right upgrades. Then you have the main soldier and barrack screens. This is jumping in, outfitting Marines with different weapons you can get with requisition points, upgrading their class-specific abilities, switching them out if they get injured with fresh Marines, or if all else fails, returning them home and replacing them with somebody else. As you progress in the story, you're also going to spend time in the research section, unlocking stratagems for battle and new passive abilities by taking on missions and learning new things about the enemy as you go on. Lastly, you have the ability to upgrade the ship, unlock new research trees, as well as outfit it and repair it after the massive battles that have happened before. Then, and that's just prior to you actually going out on the field, you field 4 Space Marines against the enemies. You teleport down to the locations, use your action points to take actions, and your willpower points to augment them. It's all XCOM with a sheen of nice change. For instance, attacking is a bit different than other titles because there's no RNG. You are a Terran Space Marine. You hit what you aim at as long as it's in range. It's just about depending on cover, range, and so on, and you can see the damage soaked down to 0 depending on your distance and their cover. So that means gone are the Butterfinger Ninjas of other games where they perform like 11 unimaginable stunts to then just miss with a double-barreled shotgun when trying to shoot a wall. The game has no shortage of information in some places as well. For example, everywhere you move, the game will show you what you can and can't hit when or if you move to that spot, as well as the damage that you'll do. Moving around Overwatch positions or steering clear of enemies is as easy as clicking on 2 spots on the field versus just the one you want to go to, and then accepting the move order, meaning that sliding between dangers is incredibly easy, and it is an absolute cornerstone of the gameplay. But I do got to bring up this HUD again because it goes absolutely insane when you're playing. You have to realize that this does sort of reflect a good deal of how Warhammer feels in the RPGs and books and the fiction. The auspices, the overlays, the spirits. When you take out an enemy in this game, this massive reticle appears, and you can choose between laying down the normal attack or if you have a special ability to add to that. The game shows you the bonuses applied, like cover, special rounds, the abilities both for you or against you, as well as your enemies. It's just that it feels like 1,000 HUDs, and to that, you have some attacks that can remove an enemy's weapon, pierce their armor, or my favorite, just walking up and slaughtering them and giving everybody a nice boost to movement. Nothing causes your people to high step it quicker than slaughtering somebody in front of them. Nevertheless, being able to do these things, being able to take a weapon away, add a stun, or slaughter them right in front of you does add just a chock full of options. It just seems like for a moment, a lot of it is ingrained within the HUD in deeper and deeper spots, and perhaps that could have been cleaned up at least a little bit. But when you finally get a handle on the action points, the willpower points, and the destruction wrought by collapsing church pillars into the heads of enemies, you remember that all this is happening with the forces of chaos and eldritch energy always watching. Your psychic energy raises the ever-growing surge meter in the battles. When it hits 100%, the power erupts, changing the battlefield, sometimes in small ways, other times in large ways. Maybe it'll give the enemies a boost, alter their DNA, maybe hammer your Marines with grief and shame, slowing their movements. It's another thing to watch, and it really does keep that psychic power that the Marines have in a bit of check, and puts it in lockstep really with the fiction of not having these guys just constantly be casting spells. Despite that issue, despite a couple, the game does one of the best jobs showing the Space Marines for what they are. Not just mobile battle barges bringing death to the blackest areas of space. These guys are jack of all trades and masters of a couple. It's that their chapters are not masters of everything, which is where all the different chapters come in. This is going to have you taking out enemies, smashing another one, healing a battle brother, and then teleporting to a higher position to get a drop on a new teleporting in enemy. It does give you this feeling of flexibility that I've felt in past games the Warhammer games didn't always do as well as they should. When you return to the ship after a job well done, those who are hurt take time to heal. They can also still be used, but watch out, because a Space Marine can only go down a couple times in battle. After that, their gene seed is basically corrupted, it's too damaged, and they are done for in the game. Here too in this screen, you're going to see the Valor and how it translates to requisition points. These requisition points are used in two places. The first is telling your chapter what category of items you want from them, like armor, more Marines, or more item drops. This happens in timed intervals when you basically phone home to tell them how you're doing. The other time to spend these is right after these battles, where you can pick up what requisitions you have after the fight. Getting some newer named armor, items, weapons, and gear can be a huge difference when used in synergy with the skills. For instance, when upgrading and promoting characters, jumping to named armor or other classes of armor can see a large change to your ability to live, your ability to move, critical hits, and combining those intelligently is the way to go. It's a nice balance between the here and the now. Spin now, get a nice snazzy big bonus weapon, or hold on to it and get another category completely of requisitions. However, even on the easiest difficulty, you will not be propping these creepy old bastards up for very long. When a Marine is hurt, they have to basically be rested for a long period of time. So a lot of times while I was in the game, I was trying to heal people up when I felt like I was very near to the end of the mission. That way, when we went back, that person wasn't stuck 5, 10, 30 days out. Even a couple humans with some shotties and a case of hate can fuck your guys up to the point where the hospital's the busiest place on the ship. Add to that chasing down the bloom, of which there are many types, and doing so unlocks their part of the research and having to search some of these levels and missions for them. The game is long, and I'm still working right at the end. That's one of the problems I had with the difficulty. You can't change it when you're in the campaign, which sort of sucks. I didn't have any bugs other than one audio one, which is sometimes one of my warriors would get hit and the sound would cut out for just a brief second for him. And while I talked about performance, it wasn't terrible. It was pretty good, but it was dodgy a couple of times. I do think that the mission variety, especially in the thematic beats, remember, this is Warhammer. It plays out musical beats like every single note is a horn just calling for war. Would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that narrative slant, especially because the actual writer for this story is the writer for many of the novels of Warhammer, and I think it's just very difficult to get all of that into a script. How did all of that come into Fun Factor, and did it reflect Warhammer? It does. Warhammer's always been about characters that look like they come out of a Holy Queen's vagina that had an anger disorder, but it's not. But instead, they're made from the deadbeat dad baby batter of the Holy Emperor, raised by the world's worst football dad, 1,000 chapters of Space Marines, basically spend eternity fighting for their lives, then reporting home like a kid nervous to tell their parents they got an A and not an A+. It's war, and it's war of an incredible scope. And what I felt was done here is they took all of that and they made it into something that was very edible. Many times a board game style title like this doesn't fit. Demon Hunters does. It offers a ton of challenge. It also takes some care of the busy work and leaves the gameplay, mostly its challenges, its battle changes, skill lists, and research, up to you, the player. And despite a HUD that borders on criminal, it actually pretty much works. As you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale. This is a game where the main character's bodies need roll cages. Healing's done by skulls. If that's not telling you right away that this is a badass world and fiction, or if it doesn't speak to you, then this game is probably not for you. But I think it does it incredibly well. I had a blast playing it. It is well worth buying. I do think that the novelist Bowden, who took on the script for this, had a difficult time getting what he wanted in. You are sort of based on the restrictions of cutscenes, the pop-ups, and those lack of voices in multiple places does a bit of that injustice. I actually think it would have been a better presentation if that at all had been done, because the actual information, not bad at all. The game scope, not bad at all. But it just didn't really hit exactly for me, like I think they probably were hoping. This, though, in the end, is a very fun game, a very long game. There's a lot going on in it, and it looks good. I really do like the slight change that they did to the graphics. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the Reddit, ACG Vids. Check out the Discord. You guys are what helps this channel keep going. If you like these reviews, if I've saved you any money, or possibly found you a cool game, maybe subscribe. Peace out.